Hello, and welcome to the Family Histories Podcast, the show for those of us sat quietly in libraries, archives, and spare rooms all around the world, tirelessly piecing together our collective social and family history. My name is Andrew Martin. I'm a family historian, and I'll be your host. In this episode, The Vaccinator, we'll be hearing about a man who found himself helping to save lives during a smallpox epidemic, and then we're looking for help to find the work of a writer who fled Mexico for Spain in the early 1800s. So, put down that old bishop's transcript, grab a cuppa, and let's meet our guests. Listeners, I'm excited to say that in this episode we have two guests today, and it's another sibling episode too. My guests are professional genealogists based in Mexico, where they run the genealogy research company Parra, helping clients to trace their family histories within Mexico's past. So, before they break out in sibling rivalry over who gets to speak first, I should welcome my guests Roberto and Ramón Parra. Hello, Roberto and Ramón. Welcome to the Family Histories Podcast.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm very excited to find out how you research, but we always start with the same question, and that is, how did you get interested in researching family history?
So I'll start. I'm Roberto. So for me, genealogy started online.
Okay.
So it was a great discovery. Just to give you some context, this is another story from my mother. This was about 15 or 20 years ago that my mother needed the birth certificate of her own mother, who was my grandmother already over 90 years old, and she didn't have her birth certificate.
Okay.
We had to drive to another state, to the small town where she was born, in Chalchicomula, Puebla, and it was a long drive, many hours, and then we had to spend lots of hours there to get the birth certificate, and it wasn't even sure that they would have it.
Oh, gosh.
But in the end, they did find it. It was beautiful because it was a great opportunity to get to know the little town where my grandmother was born and raised. So in the end, we did get the certificate. We drove back. It took us the whole day. It was more than 8 hours driving. So in the end, we had the birth certificate. But then a couple of years later, I just, out of curiosity, I gave a try with Ancestry. And I was kind of skeptical about what kind of information could be there. Just like many people in Mexico, I didn't think that it was even possible that documents from other generations could be accessible to us. So I was amazed when I found within seconds the first document that I searched for was the birth certificate of my maternal grandmother.
Okay.
And I found it, and it was like magic there in my eyes. And so I fell in love with finding documents. My background is I'm an academic. I studied both philosophy and law.
Okay.
And I'm accustomed to researching and looking for documents and articles and books. So for me, it was kind of natural to make the transition to genealogy, and I just loved it ever since.
Wow. Ramón, did you kind of get the interest in family history at the same time, or were you finding Roberto saying, come on, Ramón, you need to be interested in this too?
Well, no, actually, for me, it was a bit different. I also went to law school. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, during law school, the subjects that had history involved were my favorite subjects, such as, Roman law and history of European law and law in Mexico.
Okay.
So I've always liked history.
Yeah.
But I actually have been practicing law for over 25 years. But I've always been very, very close to my brother Roberto. So when he started looking into this, we had this conversation, and of course I found it very, very interesting. However, during the pandemic, like we were all in lockdown, and my brother started to really getting into the history of our family, digging up documents and connections and places, and sometimes confirming the oral stories that were inherited to us from our grandfathers and our great grandfathers. And I remember my grandmother telling this story or whatever, and here's the documents. So it's always very, very interesting and amazing to find a document confirming something that's always been like in the air and like a rumor or what have you. So it was how I got in touch with what Roberto was doing. And afterwards, due to some personal circumstances, I was forced to work also online. So my brother told me, why don't you help me with this and help me with that? And I started, like cooperating with him. And I realized it was like, for people like us who like to build puzzles or to play video games where there's a challenge and you need to figure some mystery out and to do this kind of puzzle with documents and persons, it really caught my attention.
So you sort of gamified your research in a way.
For me, it was something like that, yeah, for sure.
Yes, for me too. And it actually, the challenging aspect of genealogy, of not just going and getting the document, but to figuring out like a jigsaw puzzle, starting from the information that you have and your resources, figuring out how to get what you want. That's what really amazes me about genealogy.
Yeah, it's certainly an addictive puzzle. So when you started researching, you were talking, Roberto, about having to travel a very long way to get a certificate. What kinds of records did you have within your family that could help you with starting to research as well?
Well, actually, not much. Just, some documents like birth certificates and marriage certificates, but not very much. Mainly oral anecdotes that we had from the family. Really, the time that we started having access to many documents in the family was through the internet, both in genealogy platforms and also through the civil registry in Mexico, which just about 10 years ago, it became possible to get documents online.
What's it like? I know this might be a really difficult question, but what's it like researching with a sibling? Do you ever have different research theories?
Well, actually, it's very interesting because I think that even though we have a similar profiles. We both studied law. We're both interested in. So Ramon, for a long time, he was also a teacher. So even though we have the same sort of similar background, yes, there are differences.
Okay.
And there's also the fact that I live in Cancun and there are not many documents or archives in here. Ramon lives in Mexico City, so it's wonderful that he has the ability to go to the National Archive or to the military archives or many other places.
Ramon, does that mean you usually kind of win in a discussion about who's right or wrong when you're researching?
Oh, no, not at all. Quite the opposite, So my brother had a 4 or 5 years head start into this genealogy business. So he's the expert, and I always acknowledge, his background and all the knowledge that he already has. So it's not much more like arguments, but rather discussions as to what do you think could have happened and whatnot. So it's like Roberto was saying, it's very nice to be in Mexico City because you have like the biggest and largest archives here in the city, not only civil registries, but also military records and historic buildings and documents that you have. So we always try to, complement each other's work. And, we've always got along pretty well. It's been quite an experience, to be partnered with my brother and seeing this project grow over the years. It's been quite an adventure, very, very satisfying.
Yeah, I bet it is. Have you explored DNA testing? Is this kind of a big thing in Mexico? Have you done much of that before?
Actually, not. It's not a big thing.
Oh,
And the percentage of people who have taken DNA tests is really, really small. So it's not really particularly useful for genealogy research. In my case, and also in Ramon's case, we haven't even taken the test because it's usually not helpful for genealogy. So yeah, it's something that we have yet to explore.
oh, I see. So what sort of other challenges are you finding with researching in Mexico, particularly given the huge changes in, I think, the mid 1800s, where huge parts of Mexico became what is now part of the USA? So sort of, I guess, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, that kind of part. Does that present you with any challenges in researching?
Yeah, well, as we said before, we've always been into history and law. So when this project turned into a professional project, we started to work for clients. And knowing history and your background has always been useful because in some cases, you know that the ancestors of a client were Mexican, and they were born in Mexico and they had Mexican children, but you just cannot find them. And you're searching in Mexican databases and records and archives and everything, and you just cannot find them. But like you said, you're in the mid 1800s, and then you get like this idea suddenly that Mexico was twice as big back then. So thoughts and ideas come that maybe I should be looking into New Mexico, California, Utah, Colorado, and sometimes you find the ancestors there. So, being into history and law and all these documents comes very, very helpful in these cases because, not only with Mexico, sometimes you're working on a tree, on a family tree, and they tell you, oh, my ancestors were from Italy or Germany. And then you realize that back then there wasn't even a country named Italy or Germany. So you had to, get creative, and these challenges during the researches, especially in Mexico, become very, very interesting.
Yeah, I guess you're back to those addictive puzzles again. So, with that challenge of changing boundaries and the challenge of DNA testing not really being widespread enough to be helpful in Mexico, what was it that made you want to set up a professional research business?
Well, in my case, it was really about solving family puzzles. So, when I was already working with my family history and I didn't get any more documents, I started to tell my friends to let me research their families, and they were happy about that. Also, I coordinate a reading circle, and for that reading circle, I do some research about the authors that we are reading. So that's also something that I started doing spontaneously. And then at some point, someone suggested that I should do this as a service and to charge for it. And yes, it's something that it's not my main source of income, but it is something that I really enjoy doing.
That's great because it's often rare to find something that you enjoy doing that you can also make money from. Is there anything that you'd like to see improve within our genealogy community or industry to make it a better place?
Well, I think that in Mexico, what needs to improve is that people get to know that this is possible. So that in Mexico, there is the impression, many people have the impression that only the super rich can do genealogy, that it takes lots of money to hire someone to travel all across the country and get documents, and that only people that are almost part of the kind of nobility in Mexico or the aristocratic class can get access to that. And it's not like that at all.
Okay.
So I would hope that we're trying to do our best so that people know that these tools are accessible, that almost everyone can on their own search for their ancestors, but also that there are professionals that are willing to help, and that it's not something that it's only reserved for the millionaires.
Yeah. Ooh, time for a little advert break. If you are interested in learning more about family history research, why not take an online course? Pharos Tutors offers short online courses on a variety of family and local history topics. Whether you want to learn more about how to do your research, have a yearning to learn more about manorial records, or are interested in a formal certificate program. With over 50 courses ranging from beginners to advanced, there is something for everyone. Why not take a look at the course list today and plan something for the new year? Visit www.pharostutors.com. As we climb our family trees, it can be very easy to just want to keep finding more and more relatives. But actually, I think the most rewarding part of research is when you learn about the fascinating little twists and turns of their daily lives. With this in mind, it's now time for my guests to choose one of their most interesting relatives that they've researched and then share their life story. Okay, Roberto and Ramon, who are you going to introduce us to?
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, well, we want to share with you the story of one of our relatives. Actually, he wasn't a direct ancestor of ours.
Okay.
He was rather the son-in-law of one of our 5 times great-grandfather. And his name was Florencio Pérez Comoto. We'll just call him Florencio. And he was a military medical doctor. And I guess we can say he was a part of one of the biggest medical breakthroughs in history.
Ooh, okay.
But before going with Florencio, we have to start with his father-in-law, who was actually our direct ancestor and our 5 times great-grandfather. His name was Cristobal Tamariz. And actually, our grandmother, her second last name was Tamariz, so we still carry that last name with us. So our ancestor Cristobal, he was born in Spain, in a small town called Jerez de la Frontera, around 1741. And he was a doctor. He studied medicine at the University of Sevilla, and he eventually came to what is now Mexico, but back then it was the New Spain or the Nueva España, part of Spain. So Cristobal Tamariz, our ancestor, he settled in Veracruz around 1772 as a doctor. Then he got married, and he actually became the first physician at a very famous hospital here in Mexico, in the town of Veracruz, called the San Carlos Military Hospital, which was a hospital until very recently, until the year 2000. And actually, that hospital is now being restored as a museum. So fast forward about 25 years, in 1797, another young military doctor, a surgeon named Florencio, which is the character we're going to be talking about, also comes from Spain, and he starts to work at the same hospital as Cristobal Tamariz.
Ah, okay.
So Florencio had just graduated from the Universidad de Cádiz in Spain a few months earlier, and the same month he graduated, he boarded a ship and crossed the Atlantic to start his career as a physician here in the Nueva España in Mexico, more specifically in Veracruz. So he was only 22 years old, and he started to work side by side with our direct ancestor, Cristobal Tamariz. And as these stories often go, he met Tamariz's daughter, a girl named Joaquina. They fell in love, or we assume they fell in love at some point, and they got married by 1801. Now, the thing is, Florencio was not just a regular doctor. He was also a man of great culture and knowledge, and he actually owned a very impressive library with many, many books in many, many languages. In fact, his collection of books was so large and unusual that he shows up several times in records for the Inquisition, because you had to ask permission to get these books into the Nueva España and get approval for the Inquisition to have these books here in what was Nueva España,
Okay.
So we have documented that he would import or bring books from abroad, sometimes a few hundred at the same time. So his library was quite impressive.
What sort of books was he importing?
Well, medicine, philosophy, history, even law. So he was like a sort of a Renaissance man who knew a lot of things about a lot of things, actually. And he was also actually a writer and a translator and a member of different medical and scientific associations or learned societies, both here in the Nueva España and also abroad. And one of the many interesting things that we've learned is that while he was in Veracruz, he met the famous German explorer and polymath Alexander von Humboldt.
Oh, okay.
So Humboldt actually mentions Florencio repeatedly and praises his work, especially on the topic of epidemics in the city of Veracruz.
Ah, I see.
So this issue of epidemics is what we'll be interested in sharing with you, and Roberto will let you know what happened later on.
Okay, Roberto, what happened next?
Yes, so being in charge of the San Carlos Military Hospital, one of their most important duties, both of Cristobal and Florencio, was to inspect the incoming ships and specifically making sure that they were not carrying any dangerous diseases. Epidemics were a constant threat at that time. For example, yellow fever, also called then black vomit, typhus, measles, but above all, smallpox. Smallpox in Spanish it's called viruela, from the Latin variola. It's still called the variola virus in English.
Okay, yeah.
So smallpox was particularly devastating. It's estimated that just in Europe, around 400,000 people died every year.
Wow.
And the lethality per capita in the Americas was even worse and had been worse for the last 3 centuries, especially among young children.
Yeah, lethal.
And for the people who survived it, many of them were left blind or disfigured with permanent scars all over their bodies. There are pictures about this, and they are terrible. I do not recommend searching for those pictures, but
I would not be Googling those.
right, but anyone who studies a bit about smallpox is bound to run into some of these pictures. So this is the part where things start to change. In 1796, that means just 5 years before Florencio and Joaquina got married, in England there was a doctor named Edward Jenner, and he made a really groundbreaking discovery.
Yeah.
So he found out that by inoculating people with material that was taken from cows infected with cowpox, he could protect them from contracting smallpox. So this was a very simple idea, but it was a very revolutionary idea. So what's admirable is that instead of trying to profit from it or keep it a secret, Jenner made sure to spread it very widely. He started vaccinating people, and he soon also sent samples across all Europe, including France, from where it got to Spain. So by the year 1800, only 4 years later, everywhere in Europe, people were getting vaccinated. But the situation was not the same at all in the Americas. The big problem was transportation. It turns out that the vaccine didn't survive across the Atlantic, especially in hot climates such as are found in Latin America. The vaccine used to be carried in fluid, sealed between two glass slides, what is called in vitro, but it never survived the trip.
Oh.
The viceroy of the New Spain at that time, whose name was José de Iturrigaray, he really wanted to get the vaccine in Mexico. He himself had been vaccinated just before leaving Spain, but every single attempt to bring it across the Atlantic had failed. They tried many times, and always by the time it got here, it was inactive.
Oh, that's annoying because it would have taken so long to try as well.
But then in April 1804, there was a huge opportunity. In Veracruz, Florencio Pérez Comoto, who, by the way, was a member of a society called the Patriotic Society of Havana, he received very good news from a colleague from that association in Cuba called Tomás Romay. It turns out that Romay had received the vaccine from another doctor in Puerto Rico, Dr. Francisco Oller y Ferrer, who in turn had received it from the Caribbean island of St. Thomas, which was then occupied by the British. So Dr. Romay sent it to Veracruz, which was not too far, just about 1 week by ship. Perez Comoto receives the vaccine and he doesn't waste any time. He tests it on two children. He finds out that it worked. And then, in the presence of the town council authorities in Veracruz, he started vaccinating a total of 17 children that same day. And then, that same day, he sends the vaccine by express courier, which meant at that time by horseback, to Mexico City,
Yep.
directly to Viceroy Iturrigaray. And there, the doctors of the Viceroy tested it on 5 orphan boys, and it worked again. And the next day, the Viceroy staged a public demonstration in which his own 2-year-old son was vaccinated in front of a lot of people. This was done in order to encourage everyone else to trust the procedure, and it really worked. Many people, many people were vaccinated in the following days.
Okay.
So, in just a few weeks, the vaccine spread from Mexico City in all directions across the New Spain. Actually, it even reached as far north as what is now New Mexico and Texas, about 2,000 kilometers away. So, this was an incredible achievement and it saved many lives. And it happened just before the summer. This was April when Florencio received the vaccine. And the summer was usually when smallpox outbreaks were more intense. So it came right in time that year. So this could be just the happy ending of the story, but it's not.
There's always a but.
Yes. Very soon, all this created a bit of a tense and awkward situation with the king back in Spain.
Oh,
Yes,
well, why is that?
so it turns out that a few months earlier, the King of Spain, Charles IV, he had launched an official scientific mission, which was led by a Spanish doctor, Javier Balmes, and the purpose of this mission was to carry the smallpox vaccine across the empire. This was known as the Royal Philanthropic Vaccine Expedition, or in English it's known as the Balmis Expedition. It's Balmis, named after the leader.
Okay, yeah.
So this was the first international vaccination campaign in history. It was a huge deal. They had a clever method of transporting the vaccine, actually one that really worked. Instead of relying on glass slides, what they did is that they kept the vaccine alive, passing it from person to person. So not in vitro, but in vivo, from organism to organism, in this case humans. So they brought along from Galicia, Spain, 2 unvaccinated orphan boys.
Yeah.
And at first, none of them were vaccinated. At the start of the trip, they vaccinated 2. And then every 10 days, they vaccinated 2 more, so as to keep the chain unbroken. So this Balmis expedition left from Spain in November 1803. This was the year before Florencio received the vaccine. Their route went first through Puerto Rico, then to Caracas in what is now Venezuela, then Havana in Cuba, and then what is now Mexico, eventually reaching even the Philippines in Asia. But the very same day they arrived in Puerto Rico, which was their first stop in the Americas, Dr. Balmis found that someone there, a local doctor, Oller y Ferrer, had already introduced the vaccine a few months earlier. And reportedly, he was furious. He even called it a false vaccine.
Oh dear.
He insisted that the thousands of people who already had been vaccinated needed to be revaccinated.
Oh
So
no.
it was a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, some of this is sounding a little bit familiar.
So this expedition went on to Caracas in South America, where it got a much warmer reception because they did not have the vaccine over there. But after that, the next stops, which were Cuba and then Mexico, the same thing that had happened in Puerto Rico also happened there. By the time the expedition reached Veracruz, which was July 24th, 1804, pretty much everyone who wanted to get the vaccine had already been vaccinated around 3 months earlier, thanks to Pérez Comoto and other doctors. So Balmis only stayed in Veracruz for 7 days, which was much shorter than planned. He planned to stay there about a month, and it did not happen. He was kind of frustrated at finding so few candidates. He even had to order some soldiers to get vaccinated to keep his vaccine active. And the viceroy gave him a very cold reception. The viceroy thought that by that time the expedition was pretty much useless, and he is the one who had to put the funds for the next part of the expedition, so that was a problem.
Oh dear.
So Balmis had to fight a lot with the viceroy to get financial support to continue to Mexico and then to Acapulco. And from Acapulco, he set sail for the Philippines. And at last, in Manila, he got the reception that he expected from the start. There was a huge reception for him, and he was the hero.
I was waiting basically for you to say that there was some resistance, but I wasn't expecting it to come from a disgruntled scientist or medic who was just jealous that somehow it had got there before he had.
I mean, it was a huge expedition, and actually it was very useful because it was not only the vaccine,
Yeah.
but also the infrastructure and the instructions on how to set up vaccination posts. So that was very useful.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, Balmis is still portrayed as the hero. There's even a movie about this from 2016.
Oh, okay.
It's called 22 Angels, in Spanish, 22 Ángeles. It's a Spanish movie,
Yeah.
and it tells the story, but in that story, Balmis gets all the credit for this.
Wow. Well, that's a fantastic story to have in your family tree. And I think to some degree, I think all three of us can relate a little bit to the kind of the concern of having an epidemic around and having to get vaccination and wait for that vaccination to become available.
Of course.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why we found it also so interesting, because at some point with Balmis expedition, apparently it becomes a matter of who gets the credit. And it seems like it's more important who gets the credit than the actual vaccination schedule that they had.
Yeah.
So, but as my brother said, Balmis eventually gets all the credits. But it was very interesting for us to learn that our ancestor Florencio was involved in all this adventure. And just to finalize the story, we have to say that Balmis then returned to Europe, and he eventually got the credit for it, and he went down in history as a great success, and it's remembered both as an humanitarian and visionary expedition. And in the meanwhile, Florencio Pérez Comoto, he was still working in Veracruz, and he became very, very well respected and received awards, not only for his contribution on the smallpox epidemics, but also afterwards on the yellow fever. Yeah. And what's also very interesting is that 6 years later, the independence war started here in Mexico in 1810. So Florencio Pérez Comoto was actually against this revolution. He was on the Spanish side. So in 1821, when Mexico finally became independent, Florencio went back to Spain with his family, where he spent the rest of his life.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that he got recognition as well, because I was worried that he wasn't going to get any.
Yeah, for sure. At least here in Mexico and specifically in Veracruz, he got a great deal of recognition, yes.
Good. Well, thank you both for sharing the story of Florencio, but I think it's now time for you to face the brick wall. I don't even want to think how many brick walls I have in my research. Some days it feels like I've led myself into some kind of doorless room and I'm scratching the mortar for even the tiniest of clues to reach a breakthrough. But sometimes it can just take a fresh set of eyes or ears to make that brick wall come tumbling down. So can you help my guests with their brick wall? Roberto and Ramon, how can we help?
Thank you, Andrew. So our brick wall is that it's about Florencio Pérez Comoto, about this relative that we talked about.
Okay.
We believe that there must be writings by him which are autobiographical. He was a writer, apart from being a doctor. He also was a translator.
Yeah.
There are many writings that survive, but we haven't found anything autobiographical, either by him or perhaps by one of his sons. One of his sons, his name was Joaquín Pérez Comoto. He was born in Veracruz in 1811, and when he was 10, it was the consummation of the Mexican independence. They had to flee to Spain exactly 7 days after the consummation of the independence, so exactly 7 days after that, they boarded a ship to Spain, which I think it means that probably Florencio was fleeing for his life.
Okay.
So when they got to Spain, Joaquin, his son, he studied law and he became a judge, but he also was a poet and a writer and a translator. He even became a member of the Royal Academy of History. We have also found many of his published works, like poems and articles and translations, but nothing autobiographical.
Okay.
So we think that somewhere they must have written about all this, about the medical adventures of Florencio in Veracruz, but also about this, about the time that when they had to return to Spain because of the independence. There was another relative, another son of Cristobal Tamariz, so this was a brother-in-law of Florencio, who fought on the insurgents' side. He was also called Cristobal Tamariz, so I guess it must have been awkward, the family relation there. So yeah. We would love to know something about that.
Yeah. For Florencio to be a writer, but not write something about himself, that's a little strange. So I guess the chances are that there is something written that explains what he did and how he was feeling and his opinion on different things. Because obviously he was a very learned person from all the books that he'd imported and the fact that he'd studied and he'd gone into medicine and all of the work that he'd done. So it would feel like if he didn't write it, someone else would. Even if it was just an obituary, I guess, that would kind of talk about his life. But yeah, I wonder whether there's some kind of journals or some old books somewhere that maybe has something about him.
Well, yeah, that's precisely the challenge of this prequel, because as you said, once you get into all this, it's like an addiction, and you just want to know more and more and more. And our expectation is that there's something out there that will let us know about his political views, or what was it like to, having to return to Spain. And we also know that here in Mexico he was a very wealthy man, but in Spain not so much.
Yep.
So that was probably, hard on him, or probably not. We don't know, and that's precisely what we're wondering about.
Is this just that you want to write a screenplay to rival, was it 22 Angels, but write it from Florencio's point of view?
Right. So I found about this story right when the pandemic was happening. And even then, without knowing about the movie that already existed, I started thinking about all the family problems that must have caused. There was also another brother who was a priest.
Okay.
And that brother, Ildefonso Tamariz, seems to have been also involved in some secret societies regarding the insurgents.
Oh, okay.
The father of our independence, Miguel Hidalgo, he was a priest, and it seems that Ildefonso Tamariz was also involved in that. So that's also part of our prequel, you could say.
Exciting. What's the best way for listeners to make contact if they think that they have a research idea or a clue that can help break this?
The best way to contact us would be, I guess, through our website. It's parragenealogia.com. I'm going to spell it PARRAGENEALOGIA.com. So there's a way to contact us from there.
Yeah, and we'll, of course, put links to that in the episode description and the show notes for this episode. And, of course, listeners can head over to familyhistoriespodcast.com where they can read those episode show notes. And they can also send us a message. And they can email us at hello@familyhistoriespodcast.com if you think you can help Roberto and Ramon, and we'll pass that message along to them. Now, I really hope that listeners can help unravel this one for you, because it sounds like there's quite a story there waiting to be discovered. My fingers are tightly crossed.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
However, whilst they go rummaging in the records, it's just possible that I might be able to help you with this, but you'll need to follow me through to the garage.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Here we are. My secret time machine.
What?
This is crazy.
Is this for real?
Oh, it certainly is. It's a highly scientific, fully functional temporal displacement engine.
It's a what?
Well, time machine.
Yeah, but does it actually work?
It certainly does. And as a sort of thank you, I thought that you might like to take a little trip back in time somewhere and somewhen. You know, you could go and have a chat with Florencio yourself and solve that brick wall.
Well, that would be great.
Can we go now?
Indeed you can. And you can be back before you know it too. All you need to do is take a seat over there. Yeah, that's it.
Unexpected item.
Oh, shush.
Is everything all right?
Yes, all good now. Right, well, when and where would you like to go?
So the day that we would like to go back to is September 27, 1821 in Veracruz, right at the time of the consummation of independence in Mexico, and see how Florencio was doing back then.
That sounds like the perfect opportunity, but careful you don't change anything. Right, let me see. Yes, there we go. And I'll just...
Okay, wait, but how do we get back?
Yeah, you'll need this temporal beacon, and you must keep it safe. Just press that big button on the top when you're ready to come home, and you'll be back here in a flash.
This one?
Yep, that's the one. Right, here we go. Roberto and Ramon Parra, thank you, goodbye, and good luck. Veracruz, Mexico, spot on. 2021? Oh, so close. The Family Histories podcast was presented and produced by me, Andrew Martin. My guests were the brilliant Roberto and Ramon Parra, and if you've enjoyed this episode, why not hit subscribe or follow to make sure you get the next one too. Thanks for listening. Approximately no family historians were harmed in the making of this podcast.